There is a photograph taken in 1986 on the set of a film that would change everything. In it, a young man stands on a runway, aviator sunglasses pushed up on his nose, leather jacket catching the California light, grinning like someone who has just been told the whole world is his. He looks invincible. He looks like someone who has never once, in his entire life, been afraid. But that is the thing about photographs. They capture the moment, not the truth behind it. Because the young man in that picture had a secret. Several, actually. He had carried them through a childhood that would have crushed most people before they ever made it to a runway, a camera, or a dream worth chasing. And decades later, at 63 years old, standing at the top of a franchise he built almost entirely by the force of his own refusal to quit, the question that nobody really asks, the one that gets swallowed beneath the box office numbers and the breathless stunt footage, is this: what does it actually cost a man to become a legend? What do you give up? What breaks inside you? And does the boy who started all of this, the frightened, dyslexic kid from Louisville who never felt safe anywhere, does he ever get to rest? His name is Thomas Cruise Maypother IV. Most of the world calls him something shorter. But the name he was born with matters because it comes loaded with weight, with history, with a father who made sure that weight was felt early and often. He was born on July 3rd, 1962, in Syracuse, New York, a summer baby, a national holiday eve, as if even the calendar was building toward something. But there was nothing celebratory about the years that followed. His father, Thomas Maypother III, was an electrical engineer, a man who moved his family constantly, chasing work across the country, from Syracuse to Ottawa, from Ottawa to Louisville, from Louisville to Cincinnati, a nomadic life that left 4 children, Tom and his 3 sisters, perpetually uprooted, perpetually new, perpetually the strangers in someone else's town. Tom was 7 years old the first time he realized he was different from other kids in a way that couldn't be explained away or hidden. He would sit in classrooms and stare at words on a page and feel them swim, rearrange themselves, refuse to hold still. The letters would blur and shift. What other children read in seconds would take him minutes, and even then the meaning would slide away like water through cupped hands. He was dyslexic, profoundly so, in an era when that diagnosis was not understood, not accommodated, and not remotely treated with compassion in most public schools. He was labeled slow, stupid, a problem. He changed schools 15 times before he graduated. 15 times he had to walk into a room full of strangers and figure out who he was going to be this time. In this town, in this classroom, with these people who already knew each other and didn't particularly need or want one more outsider. But the reading wasn't even the hardest part. The hardest part was his father. Thomas Maypother III was, by every account Tom has offered over the years, carefully, obliquely, the way someone speaks about a wound that has not fully closed, a bully, not in the dramatic, cinematic sense of the word. More quietly than that, more insidiously. He was a man who took pleasure in diminishing his son, who found in Tom's struggles at school not a reason for empathy, but a reason for contempt. Tom has described him as a coward who would lash out at anyone smaller. The word he used once, in an interview that dropped like a stone into still water, was bully. A bully who picked on his own child. And when Tom was 11 years old, his mother, Mary Lee, finally did what she had perhaps needed to do for years. She gathered her 4 children and she left. She took them to Louisville. She worked 2 jobs. She held the family together with the particular ferocious dignity of a woman who has decided that survival is its own form of grace. And Tom watched her do it. Watched her come home exhausted and still find a way to make dinner, to ask about their days, to not collapse under the weight of everything she was carrying. It was from her, he has said, that he learned what real strength looks like. Not the loud kind, the quiet, daily, grinding kind that nobody applauds. His mother eventually remarried, a man named Jack South, who moved the family to Canada for a time, to Ottawa, and then to Glen Ridge, New Jersey. More new towns, more new schools, more standing at the edge of cafeterias, trying to figure out the social geometry of rooms where everyone already belonged. Tom joined drama class almost by accident, The way so many decisive moments in life announce themselves without fanfare. He was 14, maybe 15. A teacher suggested it. He stepped onto a stage, and something happened that had never happened to him inside a classroom before, that he was good at it. Not just passably good, genuinely, startlingly, undeniably good. The boy who couldn't make letters stay still on a page could memorize lines, inhabit a character, fill a room with presence. The stage didn't ask him to read fast or sit still or conform to a system designed for a mind different from his. It asked him to feel, to commit, to become. And he could do all three in ways that left teachers and fellow students quiet and watching in a manner that wasn't polite. It was arrested. The kind of watching you do when something is actually happening in front of you. He had found the one room in the world where the rules worked in his favor. But before he could follow that discovery anywhere, his life compressed into its darkest chapter. And it arrived, as darkness so often does, not with a warning, but with a single devastating fact delivered in the flattest possible language. His father had cancer. Thomas Maypother III, the man who had spent years making his son feel small, the man from whom Tom had perhaps quietly hoped for some eventual reckoning or reconciliation, was diagnosed with cancer in the early 1980s. He died in 1984. Tom was 22 years old. And here is the thing that cannot be rushed past, the thing that deserves to sit in the silence for a moment. Tom went to see him before he died. He went and sat beside the bed of a man who had not been kind to him and watched him go. There is a particular kind of grief that doesn't have a clean name, the grief of losing someone you never fully had, someone whose love arrived conditional and cruel and then disappeared before the debt could ever be settled. Tom has never spoken about those final visits in detail, but the fact that he went at all says something about the kind of man he was becoming, or trying to become. And then there was the church that in the early 1980s, Tom Cruise was introduced to Scientology. He has described it as a revelation, a system of belief and practice that gave him tools to confront his dyslexia, to organize his thinking, to build a sense of self that his childhood had systematically dismantled. The Church of Scientology study technology, he has said, was the first thing that made reading feel manageable, that made learning feel possible. He became, over the years, one of the most publicly committed and prominent members of the church in the world. It shaped him. It comforted him. It also, as we will see, cost him in ways he may not have fully anticipated. But first, the runway. First, the rise that, in 1980, Tom moved to New York with $300 and a plan held together mostly by nerve. He was 18 years old. He had done some theater in New Jersey. He had been told, by people whose opinions he trusted, that he had something. He auditioned. He waited. He ate cheap food in a small apartment and did not go home. Within a year, he had landed a small role in a film called Endless Love. Within 2, he was in Taps, a military school drama that put him opposite Timothy Hutton and Sean Penn and required him to hold his own in scenes with actors who had already made names for themselves. He did more than hold his own. He was noticed. The role that sharpened everything was Risky Business in 1983. He played Joel Goodson, a suburban Chicago kid left alone in his parents' house who makes a string of increasingly catastrophic decisions, ultimately sliding into a pair of socks across a hardwood floor in a white button-down shirt in a sequence so casually iconic that it has been referenced, parodied, and imitated for 4 decades. But the film wasn't just a cultural moment. It was the first time audiences saw something in Tom Cruise that they couldn't quite name, but absolutely felt a quality of aliveness, of coiled energy, of someone who is entirely present and entirely committed to whatever is happening in front of the camera. It made $53 million on a $6 million budget. It announced him. Then came 1986's Top Gun, the film that turned a promising young actor into something else entirely, into a phenomenon, into a poster, into a cultural shorthand for a particular kind of American confidence. Maverick, the reckless Navy pilot who flies too fast and feels too hard and refuses to operate within the constraints of any system that doesn't have room for his talent. The film made $179 million domestically. It sent Navy recruitment through the roof. It put Tom Cruise's face on the cover of every magazine in America and most of the world. The aviator sunglasses, the leather jacket, the grin, the runway photograph. He was 23 years old. He was, by any measurable standard, one of the most famous human beings on the planet. But fame, real fame, the kind that arrives all at once and doesn't stop, is a strange country to find yourself in without a map. And Tom Cruise, for all his drive and discipline and relentless preparation, was navigating it with the emotional equipment of a man who had spent his entire childhood learning that love was conditional, that safety was temporary, and that the floor could always drop out from beneath you without warning. He married Mimi Rogers in 1987. The marriage lasted 3 years. He married Nicole Kidman in 1990, on Christmas Eve, in a ceremony that felt to the watching world like a fairy tale. Two of the most beautiful and talented people in Hollywood beginning a life together. They adopted 2 children. They made films together. They seemed, from the outside, like a genuine love story. And then, in February of 2001, Tom filed for divorce while Nicole was 3 months pregnant with what would have been their biological child. She miscarried. The marriage ended. The details, the real ones, beneath the official statements, have never been fully aired. Though the Scientology question hovered around the dissolution like smoke, he married Katie Holmes in 2006. She was 27. He was 43. The relationship began with a public display so heightened. The couch jumping on Oprah's show, the declarations of love that felt pitched not at Katie, but the entire watching world, that it struck many observers as performance rather than feeling. There are people who believe it was exactly that. There are people who believe it was the most genuine Tom Cruise has ever been in public. The marriage lasted 6 years. Katie Holmes filed for divorce in 2012, citing irreconcilable differences. Their daughter, Suri, was 6 years old. Tom has been largely absent from Suri's life in the years since, a fact that has been publicly documented, quietly devastating, and almost entirely undiscussed in the interviews he continues to give about his .3 marriages. 3 endings, 3 children, 2 adopted and 1 biological, with varying and complicated degrees of presence in his life. This is not a tabloid ledger. It is a portrait of a man who has been, perhaps, better at commitment to his craft than to the daily, unglamorous work of being present to the people who needed him most. It is the thing that doesn't fit neatly into the action hero narrative. It is the shadow that follows the runway photograph. And yet, the reinvention that followed the 2012 divorce, the slow, grinding, 5-year rebuild of his public image and private discipline, produced something nobody quite saw coming. The Mission Impossible franchise, which had been running since 1996, shifted in its 5th and 6th installments into something genuinely extraordinary. Rogue Nation and Fallout were not simply action films. They were arguments. They were Tom Cruise making the case with his actual body at 50 years old, at 54 years old, that he would not slow down, would not use a double, would not phone it in, would not give the audience anything less than the thing itself. He hung from the side of an aircraft as it took off. He held his breath underwater for 6 minutes. He rode a motorcycle through Paris without a helmet. He broke his ankle jumping between rooftops in London and finished the take before he let anyone help him. The ankle. Watch the fallout footage. You can see the exact moment it breaks. The way his foot hits the edge of the building and folds wrong. The way he lands and immediately begins to run because he is that committed to the shot, because stopping is not something that lives in his body as an option. He runs on a broken ankle for 7 more steps before the director calls cut. It is either the most insane thing you have ever seen a movie star do, or it is the most clarifying. Maybe both. He did the same in Top Gun, Maverick, the 2022 sequel that arrived 36 years after the original and somehow, impossibly, exceeded it in nearly every measure. Critics who had spent years filing Tom Cruise under reliable box office found themselves writing words like transcendent and joyful and the best blockbuster in a generation. The film made $1.5 billion worldwide. He was 60 years old. There's something in the aviator sunglasses that keeps returning. The ones from the 1986 runway photograph. The ones Maverick wears in the original and the sequel. They appear again and again in the posters, in the promotional images, in the cultural shorthand for what Tom Cruise represents. They are armor. They are performance. They are the image he constructed in the gap between who his father told him he was and who he decided, by pure ferocious will, to become instead. Every time you see those glasses, you are seeing the distance he has traveled from a Louisville classroom where the words wouldn't stay still on the page. T63. He is in production on the 7th and 8th mission. Impossible film simultaneously, a logistical undertaking that would challenge directors and producers half his age. He is still doing his own stunts. He is still the first one on set and the last one to leave. He is still, by all accounts of people who work with him, a man who brings a quality of total commitment to whatever room he is in, which is either inspiring or exhausting depending on your temperament and your relationship to perfectionism. His relationship with Scientology remains. Whatever the church has cost him, and the arguments about that cost are long and complex and not fully resolvable from the outside, he has not wavered. It is the framework through which he understands himself and his work, and he has made peace, apparently, with the price of that commitment. What the church means to him privately, what it gives him in the hours between the stunts and the sets and the press tours, is something only he knows. What we can observe is this: a man who was told implicitly and explicitly from the time he was a small child that he was less intelligent, less capable, less deserving of ease and safety and love, and who answered that verdict with 63 years of relentless, sometimes glorious, sometimes painful, never boring existence, who built a career that has outlasted nearly every prediction made about it, who is still, right now, doing things on camera that no other actor of his stature or age would consider attempting. The runway photograph still exists. The young man in it still grins. But the man he has become is so much more interesting than the grin. Now let me speak to you directly, because that is what this story deserves at its end. You have been watching Tom Cruise your whole life. Maybe since you were a child sitting in a dark theater with the sound turned up too loud and the screen too bright, and something happening in your chest that felt like excitement, but was really closer to recognition. Recognition of someone who wanted something so badly, they made you believe they could actually get it. You have watched him through the blockbusters and the tabloids, through the couch jumping and the broken ankle, through the marriages and the silences and the sequels that shouldn't have worked but did. And somewhere in that watching, you made a judgment. Most people have. He's too intense. He's too committed to a church that raises difficult questions. He's too absent from his daughter's life. He's too much of everything, always at full volume with no visible off switch. And maybe all of that is true. But here is what is also true. He was a boy who couldn't read, who moved 15 times, whose father called him a coward, and whose letters on a page refused to stay in their places. And he found a stage. He found a runway. He found a pair of aviator sunglasses that let him look out at the world from behind something solid, something constructed, something entirely his own choosing. And he has been choosing every single day since to show up, to do the work, to hang from the aircraft, even when his ankle is broken, to make the sequel even when logic says the moment has passed. You might be standing at the edge of your own runway right now. Something you want that feels too large, too far, too dependent on abilities you're not sure you have. You might be staring at your own version of letters that won't hold still, a dream that keeps rearranging itself before you can quite grasp it. And the question this story leaves you with isn't whether Tom Cruise made all the right choices, because he didn't. The question is what you do with the wrong ones. What you build in the space between the father who diminished you and the person you are deciding to become. What you run toward, even on a broken ankle, because stopping was never really something your body learned to do. Put the glasses on. Step onto the runway. The camera is running. What are you going to do with the take?